Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays White Plume Mountain Notes series as I DM my intrepid group of players through White Plume Mountain, updated to 5th edition, in the White Plume, or the Tales of the Yawning Portal book that has 7 classic adventures updated to 5th edition. Definitely recommend you check it out for some old school, hardcore dungeon crawling action. Anyway, another good episode this week. Of course, I'll go through some notes and we'll go over what happened, go through your feedback, and all of that. But first, if you happen to be watching this, I've broken the 1,000 YouTube uh, subscribers barrier, and my 1,000th subscriber was Mr. Stuff Guys. That's MrStuffGuyz. So if you were subscribing for this video series or whatever, if you happen to be watching this, thank you very much, Mr. Stuff Guys. Evidently, that's a bit of a milestone with YouTube. They sent me an email uh, with kind of a fun animated GIF and said, "Welcome to the Opal Club," and it gets me access, including support from live people at YouTube. So I I mainly do my Geek Talk radio show, Shane Plays, but I've also been working this YouTube stuff because I want to have a whole kind of ecosystem of cool geek content. And the YouTube is catching on more and more alongside my radio show, live radio, that I also push out as a podcast, and then I also put it in this channel for those that are interested. But it covers just a variety of geeky topics and fandoms and comic books and TV and games, tabletop games, computer games, whatever. But thank you, Mr. Stuff Guys, if you happen to be watching this. Very glad, and I hope the channel continues to grow. I'm enjoying it. I think I mentioned last video that I was off doing my radio show at a remote broadcast, doing the radio show, and somebody from Sheridan, Arkansas, walked up and went, "Hey, D&D YouTube guy," and I was like, "Oh wow!" So I guess they're both kind of going in parallel there. But anyway, moving on. This past session for White Plume Mountain was very much an exercise. And what do you do as a DM when the players go off on a completely unexpected tangent? When they're like, "Ooh, a sparkly," and they go after that, and you're like, wow, they're really focusing in on this stuff. And NPCs that don't matter, or other objects or whatever in the adventure. And what do you do? So we'll talk about that more later in the episode. But that was kind of the theme. I went, like way off 90 degrees from what I expected what we do, but we still had fun. That's the point. You got to be, as a DM, you got to be able to roll with that. I told my group this past session that I won't fudge or protect them from White Plume Mountain any further. And I haven't done a whole lot of that, but I've tweaked a little bit here and there. For example, they were supposed to fight 8 knights with Sir Bluto, and they only fought 4. And there's been a couple other times where I've modified stuff slightly, but for the most part, they've tackled the dungeon on its own terms, and they're 1/3 done now, and they've done really well. So I told them, I said, I'm not going to protect you anymore. They went in at 6th level. It's written for an 8th level party or higher. However, they have roughly usually 6 or 7 people in the group. Standard D&D group sizers is usually 4 to 6, so they're running a little large, which is fine. I run on behalf of a store. We've had 10 or 11, 12 people playing before. I don't want to do that continually on and on, but we can wing it if we have to. But they've been doing really well, and towards the end of the first part of Out of the Abyss, they were doing really, really, really well. So, even though they're 6th level, they're, I guess, slightly OP, and now they have Black Razor, on top of that. So, I'm not. I just said I'm not really going to fudge the dungeon anymore. And I haven't done a whole lot of that, but you're definitely meeting the dungeon on its own terms from here on out. And I did that to kind of keep reminding and stressing to them, White Plume Mountain can be really dangerous. They've encountered a couple of the dangers, but I mean, there's some stuff like there's like this boiling lake that you're under. I mean, just boom, it can kill you real quick. So some other stuff. Um, One other note I've got before we go into viewer feedback is a player asked me about changing. He said, "Hey, can I change a feat?" And I thought about it and asked him why, and he kind of explained it, and I said no. And the main reason the feat wasn't chosen recently. The feat has been with the character since creation, basically, uh, for this adventure. Where several sessions in, there was no good role playing or narrative justification for why not to have the feat. And really, evidently, it came out because this is the player that has Black Razor, so I guess they wanted to switch up a feat, if I'm understanding correctly, um, to be more in line with having Black Razor now. So I said no. Sometimes as a DM, I will say no. I'll try to hear out what the reasoning is. But if somebody's, I'm more lenient if they just leveled up and they just chose something and like it's been within a session of that or something. I'm a little bit more lenient on feat, spells, and abilities that have just been chosen. But if you've had it for a while and then it's like something happens in the game, like, oh, I got this magic item, or we have another party member or something, and now this feat isn't quite, I'm sorry, that's what you chose. There has to be some sort of uh, not buy-in. There's got to be some sort of investment, skin in the game with how you choose to build and play your character. That being said, I've allowed before if somebody just leveled up and they called me and said, hey, I want to do something different. I've said I'll let you do that. I'd rather not. But if you really want to do that, you can. However, have you thought about trying this instead of just changing your feat or your spells or whatever? But if they've just chosen it, I'll probably allow them to you know uh, do a take back and choose something else. But in this case, I said no. So we're going to get into viewer feedback. So let's put on the +3 spectacles of viewer feedback and see what we have to see, and then of course we will get to the recap of the most recent session. So uh, several bits of feedback from Rob Plummer. Rob is a constant viewer. Appreciate his support. He comments quite often. So we'll kind of go through these. I think he made 4 comments. So let's go through these. One, he said, Shane, I think the rules compilation would be cool. Helps all of us DMs out here, young and old like me. Doesn't hurt for us all to get a refresher and also discuss rules and official rulings. So what he's talking about is, I've mentioned a couple of times, I'm thinking about doing a video series where I just compile official answers from like Wizards of the Coast staff that have been asked on social media. How does this rule work? What about this? What would you do in this situation? And then just have a series of videos where we go through a few of those in each video. The feedback so far has been people would like that. I got to find the time to do it. I'm going to try. I mean, believe it or not, this video that comes out once a week, by the time we play 2 or 3 hours, on a weeknight, and then I do up my notes and everything and get ready uh, to do the video. So that's another 30 minutes to an hour. So let's just say we're at 3 hours right there. Then I got to record it. That's about an hour, and then I got to edit it, and that's 2 or 3 hours. And then render it and get it out and promote it. So you're looking at what, 6, 7, maybe even 8 hours per video of time investment. Believe it or not. So anyway, we'll see if I and I'm not begging for money. Don't get me wrong. I do have a Patreon for Shane Plays that helps me offset the cost of my radio show. The more I can get of Patreon support, the less like freelancing work I have to do. I do freelance web design on top of my normal job, which would be more time that I can put into the videos. Again, I'm not begging for money. I'm going to make these whatever, I do these, one, for more exposure for Shane Plays. 2, I like to do them and it helps people. And 3, I run ads on YouTube. I make no bones about that. So, there's a little bit of revenue coming in there. So, but if somebody was like, hey, I'd really like more videos from Shane Plays, that's one way you could help is, there's a Patreon that supports the radio show. Just go to Patreon and search for Shane Plays, or go to shaneplays.com and look on the radio show pages. The Patreon's on there. But it all kinds of works together. My radio show, my YouTube, all of it all works together. It's one big thing. It's a whole brand that I'm working on, and there's multiple spokes to that wheel. So anyway, okay, again, I'm not begging for money. I'm just saying, if that's something you could do if you really wanted me to make more videos. Let's see. So thanks for that feedback, Rob. Now, Rob also said, and we're talking about metagaming, that was something we talked about last week in the video and at my table with my players. So Shane, I see metagaming often at my table, and these are veteran players. I think, like you said, it's just natural. On certain things, I make my players roll for knowledge type checks, such as nature, history, or religion, to see if their character knows things. An example would be knowing if that fire stops at trolls regeneration. All the players know it, but how many of the characters know it? And that's what it comes down to. That's really the litmus test on metagaming. That's the fine line. Would your characters know it? When it egregiously crosses that line, that's when I tend to step in. And everybody handles a little bit differently. But I agree. Like I said last time, I'm agreeing with Rob here. I think it's natural to metagame. It's almost natural. You almost have to train yourself not to. So I try not to be too harsh on it unless it's just a recurring problem. Um, so let's see here. Rob also said, Shane, I like the idea of giving the player abilities as the character gives it souls. I think this is a great idea, and we'll probably use it. Talking about Black Razor, um, and we've talked about Black Razor a lot for several videos now because it's such a powerful sword, such a well-known sword. How do you handle it? Dumping a massively powerful item like that into a group of 6th level characters or even 8th level characters. How do you handle it for good role playing but also game balance? And what I decided was, it's going to be a multi-step process. As it gets souls every 3 days, that's the requirement. It will unlock new abilities that it has, and then as it goes without souls every 3 days, those abilities will start turning back off. Um, Up to and including, and the book says, the Black Razor's description, the Dungeon Master's Guide says that if it doesn't get souls everything 3 days, it will turn on the wielder. Because it's very clear that, man, I'll eat your soul just like anybody else's. A soul's a soul to it. It's the wielder is completely a means to an end, and Black Razor does not form, some emotional attachment. It just wants to end or hurry up the heat death of the universe. Basically, it's a nihilist. So um, so what I've determined, it will turn on the wielders. It will stop. It will start turning abilities off uh, until it just because it wants to be given up to somebody else if you're not using it rightly. Now Rob says, uh, when I said that, um, the DMG says if 3 days go by without a soul, Black Razor will turn on its wielder. I'll take it up to the point where Black Razor isn't even attuned, and we're going to talk about attunement later in this video. With the wielder, Rob said, I agree with you. I'll probably do something similar, but if it's not few over time, I will have the sword take the soul of the character. I think that's totally appropriate because if you're going to have a character running around with a soul-eating sword, there should be a certain element of risk to that. So I'm totally okay with that. Um, Okay, and then we were talking about I guess the level of deadliness in encounters in White Plume Mountain, and Rob said deadly encounter ? Yes, it should be a deadly encounter as they are getting Black Razor. So talking about making the Quesnef that they fight be more deadly. Rob in fact is going to have Quesnef the Oni be holding, not be holding like looking at it, but wielding Black Razor when his party confronts Quesnef. He's saying it should be deadly. They're getting Black Razor. Totally fine with that. Joshua Arvidsson says, always enjoy your videos. A Lost Mine to Fandelver video series would be great. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Joshua. I appreciate the feedback and the encouragement. I'd mentioned I might do a Lost Mine of Fandelver video. I think that would, or series, I think that would be really helpful because that's the starter set adventure for 5th edition. And it's a good adventure in its own right. Does a good job of teaching both DMs and players the rules kind of in a phased manner. The problem is, I don't think I'd be able to do it like running a party through it again. I don't have time in my docket, if you will, to run a party through it. But what I might do is read back through the adventure, make notes on what I remember, and then do a short video series on how to run it. I think I may very well do that. So now finally, Lord Cephalion, I hope I'm saying that right, left a very in-depth series of comments on talking about metagaming, and he starts it off with metagaming is evil, smiley face. And he really goes into some good points. I'm going to recommend, because I don't have time to go through everything, because he was really, really descriptive on his thoughts and really put a lot of thoughts. So go to the video 6 and look in the comments. But Lord Cephalion, he prefers knowing little to nothing about the particular setting or adventure that he's playing in, not DMing. If it once, basically he's saying once he knows that he's going to be in an adventure, he tries to avoid as much knowing about it as possible. Similar to what I do with, like, I don't want to know anything about the new Star Wars movie. Nothing. I want to know it's coming out and what date and when I can go see it. I don't want to. I want to go in cold, absolutely cold. So I avoid as much as possible. Even though I love Star Wars, it's kind of a similar thing here. He's like, if I know, like he was about to read Lost Mine of Phandelver, and he found out that he was going to be running or playing in it, so he set it aside. He just, got rid of it for that time, so that he wouldn't, you know, uh, spoil anything. He also tries to, basically, what he's talking about here is method acting. He says, I always try to keep my mindset within my character state of mind. Even playing combat only will my character can see and hear instead of allowing the top-down view to give me sometimes subconscious level of omniscience that seems to affect many players when the battle map comes out. That's one of the reasons why he prefers theater of the mind over battle maps. Yeah, I mean, if you got a 5-foot grid battle map and everybody can see the placement and this and that, that could contribute to some battle game, to some metagaming. I just thought, for my personal, I'm like, it's tactical combat in D&D, unless you're doing theater of their mind. Um, so that I'm a little more lenient. I'm okay with that for the most part. Because that's the combat rules and everything is written around, playing on a grid and this and that and the other. But there's a lot of people that prefer theater of the mind. I grew up playing role-playing games with theater of the mind because nobody had maps, nobody had minis or anything like that. We did it all theater of the mind. It was fine. I have to say, these days I prefer, if a game has tactical combat rules, I prefer using the maps and all that. But that's just me. You know, it's whatever works for your group, your DM, and all that stuff. Um, Lord Cephalion goes on to say, even if my character has a rather high modifier in a particular knowledge, I never assume that my character knows some piece of information related to that skill. He prefers to defer to the DM. I think that's the best way to go. I don't care how high your skill is. That just gives you a good chance of knowing something. It doesn't automatically mean you know something. And I do have players who say, "Well, I'm a 6th level whatever, so I would know that." I'm like, "Are you sure you would Know that?" And sometimes I'm like, "Okay," and then sometimes I'm like, "No, let's roll for it." So, and then Lord Cephalion says, as a DM, I try to minimize metagaming by talking to the group about it and by leading by examples. Up to and including, he doesn't allow his NPCs to metagame. Like the NPCs that he's running as a DM, he doesn't let them know everything, right? Um, so mostly through NPCs, as some players have this preconceived notion that as NPCs or DM characters, they know everything he or she does. No, they absolutely don't. That's a great point, Lord Cephalion. I'm not sure I've ever brought it up in my video series for either this or White Plume Mountain. Now, Lord Cephalion has a group of longtime group of 20 plus years, so they've metagaming isn't as much of an issue. But these are some of the things he's learned over the years. And like I said, there's more stuff in here. There's a couple of comments that he posted. Really, really good stuff. He takes it personally when he's accused of metagaming and goes on to explain why and gives an example of where he specifically was trying not to. And he says he's personally loved White Plume Mountain since he first learned about it in 1999 via the TSR Silver Anniversary Collection. He got as a gift from his mother. Yay, Lord Cephalion's mother. I started playing D&D in 95 and DMing in 96 with my DM, so that's 20-something years. So, Lord Cephalion, thanks for your comments. Really appreciate them. Yeah, metagaming can be an issue, so it's good to. I love that where you're talking about where, you try to method act, put yourself in your character's mindset, and then also even the NPCs that you do when you DM. I think that's great. So, all right, that's it for the viewer feedback. So we're going to take off the +3 spectacles of viewer feedback. I always definitely appreciate your viewer feedback. I think it's a great part of the series, and it introduces topics and things to talk about that I may not have thought about, and gives a chance to further clarify maybe things I said or further rulings, and that sort of thing. So anyway, now on to what happened last video. Okay, so when we ended the last session, they had just defeated Sir Bluto and his 4 knights, his 4 evil knights. There were supposed to be 8. I scaled it down to 4. It was still a pretty tough fight. in, I believe, room 24, which is where the floating stream will carry characters into with their kayaks before looping back to, I think it's room 23, where the kayaks are first found and the floating stream is first found. So first thing I want to talk about, we had a little bit of loot fever, um, where they were checking everything out, and basically what they found was, other than the standard great swords and plate armor and this and that Sir Bluto and his knights have on. And remember, there were Sir Bluto and two of his knights were killed. Two of the knights are under a charm effect from the Rod of Rulership, and we're going to talk about that more, about charm versus mind control versus this and that and the other. That came up a little bit in the session. However, basically the loot they got that's unusual. They got a key from Sir Bluto's corpse that opens up two different secret doors that lead out of this area and back into the main hallway that runs in between Area 23 and then the terraced aquarium to the south. So, and the only way to open it just says in the adventure, the only way to open these secret doors is with the key. I don't think you can find them without the key. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check that, but you can open them without the key. That's just all there is to it. Maybe you could, I don't know, smash them down or something like that, if players tried to go that direction. But they did cast Detect Magic, and Sir Bluto's boots were glowing. Boom. So they checked them out. Loot fever. The player, again, this is a newer player who is still learning the ins and outs and the rules and unwritten rules of tabletop role playing and etiquette and this and that. He's like, my boots. And this is the same player that got Black Razor and wanted the cursed armor that was part of Quesnef's loot, where the Black Razor was. There was some cursed armor that protects you, gives you resistance against one damage type, but makes you vulnerable to two others. And he was like, I want that armor, I want Black Razor, da da da. And he ended up with Black Razor. They figured out the armor was cursed and used it. Well, then he's like, in this room, he's like, my boots. And people are like, well, now hold on. And talked a little bit about, making sure there's a fair distribution of loot. Because again, and I imagine other DMs are running into this, this player and a lot of new players into D&D and tabletop role playing these days are they're coming from a video game background. They kill something, they see loot, they grab it. They're not used to thinking of, unless they're coming from World of Warcraft or an MMO, they're not used to, well, who gets that, right? So he was like, they're dead, I earned it, I'm taking it. Anyway, another player got the boots, which do turn out to be boots of leaping and striding, once you use Identify or attune to them or whatever. So now, I mentioned a little bit of squirrel, which are sparkly. So the two things that the players totally focused in on that I really wasn't expecting was the two charmed knights. They got put under the Rod of Rulership, so they're charmed for 8 hours. The bard charmed them, so they consider the bard a friend, and by extension, to a certain part, the bard's friends party. But also these kayaks. I thought we were done with the kayaks, but the kayaks came back in with a vengeance. So, we basically, the whole time they were in this room, in the post fight activity and discussion and this and that, and really they took a short rest and all that. At certain intervals, however long it takes for the kayaks to make the circuit, the loop, they kept coming back through the room. Every now and then, here come the 4 kayaks swooshing through. And then off they go, and then a certain, every few minutes, I don't know, I haven't sat down and calculated it. You could look at the map and figure out how long that circular stream is, and then I ruled they were going 50 feet per second. So, you could figure it out if you want, but let's just say every few minutes. So the characters kind of ended up pulling, I think, 3 I don't know why they didn't pull all 4, but they pulled 3 kayaks out and left another one still zipping. Okay. Sure, why not? And I just made it, they could just grab them and pull them out. They may have pulled all 4, but I'm pretty sure they just said 3. So the other thing is they really focused in on these knights. And I had a little hint of that at the end of last session because they were mentioning the knights and them being charmed and what are they going to do with them. But, I just figured they'd keep them around till the charm expired and then they would kill them or fight them or whatever. I just figured that'd be the end of it. But they really got into talking to these knights. How long have you been here? Why are you here? How did you get here? Um, and they were interrogating them on, what have you done? And these knights are evil. I mean, they're neutral evil. They've been with Sir Bluto, who is uh, an infamous villain, well-known infamous villain that has a big price on his head. They've done bad things. Now I played them that they had a certain nobility and their own code of honor because they're knights, but they're evil. I mean, they've done evil things. So they're talking to him about what have you done. He's like, basically murder, rape, pillage with Sir Bluto. And, once they crossed the line, they just kept crossing it, even though they maintained some of their code of honor among themselves. So, so these knights are charmed for 8 hours, and, the bard is trying to think, how can I take advantage of this? And there's some discussion, should we kill them, should we not, how long will they stay charmed, this and that and the other. And uh, I kind of let them, because basically they treat charm is not mind control. Okay, charm is not mind control. That's one thing that I think people sort of instinctively or just naturally try to treat charm as a form of mind control, but it certainly is not. Um, they treat or they view the caster as a friend. So there's, good feelings and stuff, but that doesn't mean they're going to do everything the caster says. Now, here is Charm Person. It's a first level enchantment. This is on page 221 of the Player's Handbook. It's casting times 1 action, range is 30 feet, components verbal, somatic, durations 1 hour. Now remember the Rod of Rulership slightly different. If they're charmed, they're put under charm for 8 hours, and there's no further saving throws or anything like that. So you attempt to charm a humanoid you can see within range. It must make a wisdom saving throw and does so with advantage if you or your companions are fighting it. Now I don't remember if we did that with the Rod of Rulership. I don't know if the description on the Rod of Rulership mentioned that or not. If it fails the saving throw, it is charmed by you until the spell ends or until you or your companions do anything harmful to it. This is all that it says. The charmed creature regards you as a friendly acquaintance. I'm going to say that again. The charmed creature regards you as a friendly acquaintance. When the spell ends, the creature knows it was charmed by you. And at higher levels, you can charm more people, casting the spell at higher levels. That's all the charm says. That's all. I'm going to look up the Rod of Rulership real quick just to see if there's any, even though it's a moot point at this point because, I just made it a straight charm for last session, but I'm curious if there's any major differences in how the Rod of Rulership charms. I'm going to look that up real quick. Okay, so the Rod of Rulership, if they fail their saving throw and they get up to, it's up to 120 feet. It's more powerful in the effect and how many you can affect with the Rod of Rulership. But anyway, while charmed this way, if they miss their saving throw, the creature regards you as its trusted leader, not just a friendly acquaintance. If harmed by you or your companions or commanded to do something contrary to its nature, a target ceases to be charmed in this way. The rod can't be used until the next dawn. So that's the difference with the Rod of Rulership. But basically, we ruled they were basically trying to make the knights as harmless and as much of a non-threat as possible during this 8 hours. Now, if I would have gone back and really focused in on the regard you as its trusted leader, I may have been a little bit more lenient with this, but I was doing it more as the friendly acquaintance of the charm spell. Now that may or may not even, because the Rod of Rulership, that was a random magic item that was given out before the adventure began because I was trying to help compensate. They were 6th level and this is an 8th level adventure. But between charming and holding persons and, There's a mace of fear and there's a rod of rulership and all that. They're doing. They've got a lot of crowd control going on. Um, but anyway, what I ruled, they were like, hey, take off your armor and clean it. And the knight's like, okay, yeah. So they're cleaning because they're trying to get them out of their armor. Well, once they finish cleaning it, they're going to put it back on or whatever it is that they would normally do. But they were like, give us your weapons. And the knights were like, no, I'm not going to surrender my weapon. So, there was kind of, now, if I would have focused in on the trusted leader, they'd have probably like, okay, here's our swords. But I didn't. I was doing friendly acquaintance. Even if you like somebody and you're friendly with them, you're like, why am I going to give you this is, a knight's sword or sword, wherever they're carrying. That's a big deal to a knight. You know, um, it's like, in uh, Full Metal Jacket where they're, in basic training and they're, this is my rifle, this is my gun, reciting and basically singing to their gun every night and all that. It's their life. So give us your weapon. They're kind of feeling around about it. Now, uh, they did take now one thing that happened. They did take a short rest before that. Uzumaki, the fighter who got Black Razor, was really interrogating these uh, knights. What have you done? What are your crimes? This and that and the other. And when they're railing off their list of crimes, like, here's what we've done, da da da. And what he's doing is he was trying to angle for a reason to kill them to feed Black Razor. But there was, he's like, my backstory is because his backstory, there was, I think, some slavers and really horrible things that happened in his village. So people that he thinks are bad, that trigger that within him, he'll just kill them. And he's like, basically trying to provoke a fight. Or he's like, once he heard that, he's like, okay, I'm killing him with Black Razor. And everybody else, we talked about alignment a little bit. And again, I didn't want like, man, you can do what you want. If that's the action you take to choose to take, that's cool. But you need to understand alignment. Because he's chaotic good, and for the most part, a chaotic good character is not just going to outright kill somebody who's at that point not hostile. But he's like, yeah, but my backstory and this. I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's if you want to do a backstory that way, you could do that. Some of the other players, including the Bard, looked at him and said, I'm not going to help you. If you bite off more than you can chew here, I'm not going to help you. And like some of the other party was kind of the same way. Because for the most part, it's a good aligned party. I think there's a little bit of neutral, but for the most part, it's a good aligned party. And they're like, these are basically prisoners of war right now, and they're friendly and non-hostile, and I'm not going to help you. So there was some interesting discussion on that. And the player who plays Uzumaki, Gerald, he said I could use his name before. He was like, he role played it well. He's like, ugh, and then he kind of backed off. Like he really won't, but he's like, okay, and he backed off, almost like talking Wolverine down or something like that. So that was pretty interesting. But what they did was they took a short rest. Let me tell you what I was assuming was going to happen, because this is Area 24 is a pretty fortified room. Unless somebody gets on a kayak and comes in, it's really hard for somebody to get to you. And you could do just like the knights, and you can keep whoever's on guard can keep an eye on the water. And if you see disturbances in the water, you know that somebody's coming in the kayaks, just like the knights did. And that's how they knew that the party was coming to do their ambush. So this is a really secure area for a long rest. So I just figured they'd take a long rest. When the 8 hours is up, the knights would snap. They would take care of the knights, and they would move on. That's what I assumed. I thought we were going to be in this room literally 5 or 10 minutes of real life time, not game time, 8 hours or whatever, but like 5 or 10 minutes, and then we would move on and end up in one of the other 2/3 of the dungeon. But like I said, they were like sparkly squirrel, and they got all into these kayaks and the knights and everything like that. We were in this room forever, to the point where I sort of broke the fourth wall as the DM with them, and I was like, man, we've been in here forever. You guys are killing me, really signaling there's nothing else in this room of import, and just kind of like, oh, you guys are killing me here, which I rarely, if ever, do that as a DM, but I was just kind of joking around with them, like, man, you guys are killing me. And one or two of the other players, I know Uzumaki, the black razor guy, was like, "Yep, they're killing me too," because he wanted to get back into it. But anyway, um, which brought up that always interesting discussion of, at what point do you step in and move the story forwards when the players have really just gone off on a tangent? And I would prefer, unless there's just really time constraint reasons, to just let the players follow their nose. you know, and that's what I did. I didn't try to push them. I did at one point joke around, I'm like, man, we've been in here forever, but I didn't try to force them game wise to move on. I let them do whatever they wanted to do. Um, so anyway, they ended up taking I thought they would take a long rest. I had forgotten they had taken a long rest after they defeated Quesnif, the Oni, and got Black Razor, and in game time it's only been a few hours, if that. They went up north, they found the canoe room, or the kayak room, and they messed around a little bit, and then went in and fought Sir Bluto. So it's just been like maybe a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours since they fought Quesnif, if I'm remembering right. So all they could do was a short rest. So um, that being said, let's look at the rules of short rest versus long rest. I don't know if I've ever talked about it in this series, or even um, the Out of the Abyss series. So I just want to, as a refresher, I'm sure we all know these, but I just thought it'd be a good time to kind of point out the differences between a short rest and a long rest. Now, resting. This is on page 186 of the Player's Handbook. Um, a short rest. It says adventurers can take short rests in the midst of an adventuring day and a long rest to end the day. So regardless of what time you take a long rest, that's like nighty night. That's the end of the day. A short rest is a period of downtime at least 1 hour long. Normally we just say it's an hour, but there may be a reason why you have to make it longer, during which a character does nothing more strenuous than eating, drinking, reading, and tending to wounds. A character can spend one or more hit dice at the end of a short rest up to the character's maximum number of hit dice, which is equal to the character's level. So if you're 6th level, you have 6 hit dice. Your hit dice are determined by your class. I think if you're a fighter, your hit dice are D10. There's a rogue, maybe D8. I don't know. I'm just throwing numbers out there, whatever they are. Barbarians, maybe D12. For each hit die spent this way, the player rolls the die and adds the character's Constitution modifier to it. The character regains hit points equal to the total, so you can get hit points back during a short rest. The player can decide to spend an additional hit die after each roll. A character regains some spent hit dice upon finishing a long rest, as explained below. So what that's saying is, let's say that your class's hit dice are a D10. Let's say you're 6th level. So you have 6 hit dice, and they're all D10s. And then your Constitution modifier is +1. I'm just throwing numbers out there. So for each hit die you spend, and you can spend up to 6 if you have them in one short rest, you roll a D10 +1 because your Constitution modifier. If your Constitution modifier is +1, this is just an example, and you get that many hit points back. Now, what it also says, you can choose to spend more hit dice after each roll. So you don't have to say, I'm going to spend 3 and roll them. You could roll 1, see how it goes, then roll another, see how it goes, roll another, see how it goes, up to your maximum. So however many you have left, you can spend up to that. Because you can do more than one short rest within a 8-hour period or 20, whatever, before you take a long rest. So you might have only 3 left. You can spend up to that. Anyway, hope that's helpful and interesting. So I realized while I was doing editing that I completely forgot to share the long rest rules to compare and contrast to the short rest rules. Also, I did a little bit of research after I recorded the video, and it appears that there's no firm ruling on how many short rests there can be between each long rest. Maybe I missed something, but there's nothing directly here in the book rules that I see. And then I went on to some forums and stuff like that, and it doesn't seem completely firm. So I guess it's just up to the DM. Although I'd probably allow at least one short rest between long rest. So anyway, okay, so the long rest rules are as follows. A long rest is a period of extended downtime at least 8 hours long, during which a character sleeps or performs light activity. Reading, talking, eating, or standing watch for no more than 2 hours. If the rest is interrupted by a period of strenuous activity, at least 1 hour of walking, fighting, casting spells, or similar adventuring activity, and I'm assuming that it's not 1 hour of fighting and 1 hour of casting spells. I'm saying they're saying 1 hour of walking. The character must begin the rest again to gain any benefit. At the end of a long rest, a character regains all lost hit points. The character also regains spent hit dice up to a number of dice equal to half of the character's total number of them. So if you're 6th level, you would get 3 hit dice back, not to exceed your total. So if you already had 4, you would get 2 back, and for a maximum of 6, if that makes sense. For example, if the character has 8 hit dice, he or she can regain 4 spent hit dice upon finishing a long rest. A character can't benefit from more than 1 long rest in a 24-hour period. And a character must have at least 1 hit point at the start of the rest to gain its benefits. So, again, that was, that's page 186 in the player's handbook. Also, this comes up a lot. People are talking about rest and this and that and what you can do on a rest. Evidently, elves meditate for 4 hours or something like that. You still can't do anything major crazy during a long rest, regardless if you only have to sleep or meditate or something half the time or go into a trance. It's rules as written or as intended. You can't do all kinds of crazy stuff during a long rest. It's sort of an enforced downtime to get your strength and spells and abilities and all that back. So there we go. Let's get to what happened after the short rest in this last session. So Black Razor finally let Uzumaki attune to him, or it really, during this short rest. And you can attune during a short or a long rest. We'll talk about attunement rules here in a second. But because souls were being fed, and or at least one soul, Sir Bluto's soul, and the Black Razor saw that Uzumaki was willing to wield it in a deadly fashion, even though it kind of had to sweeten the pot. Like, let me give you a little haste, let me give you a little +3/+3 temporarily, just to show you what I can bring to the table. We talked about that last video. Uzumaki said, or Uzumaki and Black Razor basically came to an understanding, and they attuned, or Uzumaki attuned to Black Razor, which means that now Uzumaki can use Black Razor's magical abilities once they unlock, and Black Razor as a magical item is basically his sword or her sword. The player's a guy, the character is female, so her sword. Now, no abilities have unlocked yet permanently. They got a brief taste, but right now it's just a great sword. But as things progress, then abilities will start unlocking. So, and Black Razor, said, I'll give you power if you continually feed me souls, but clarified again, like the jerk that he is, we've established Black Razor is a jerk, that the deal was not kept. The wielder's soul was just as good as anyone else's, like basically continually feed me souls. And the first night that we did Black Razor, I was doing this big booming voice, and I've kind of backed away from that now that I've made that point. And the player was like, "Thank you for not doing that voice again. It freaks me out and made me want to throw Black Razor into lava." Anyway, okay, so let's talk about attunement, because Black Razor was being attuned, and also those boots were being attuned. So, and to be honest, as a DM, I wasn't even thinking in terms of attunement. And somebody was like, "How many attunement slots does Black Razor take?" And we're like, "Whoa!" So we went and looked up the rules on attunement just as a refresher. Basically, the way attunement works, and this is on page 136 and 138 in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You literally, and this is kind of a newer concept. Back in the day in D&D, you didn't really. They may have had rules that kept you from having too many magic items, so that you're not just some walking, tank with bristling with all kinds of crazy magical whatever. So in 5th edition, we have attunement now, where you can basically attune up to 3 magical items or weapons. We'll look at the rules here. Again, this is page 136 and page 138 in the Dungeon Master's Guide. 137 is like a table. It's just tables, so that's why it skips a page. But anyway, attunement. Some magic items require a creature to form a bond with them before their magical properties can be used. This bond is called attunement, and certain items have a prerequisite for it. If the prerequisite is a class, a creature must be a member of that class to attune to the item. If the class is a spellcasting class, a monster qualifies if that monster has spell slots and uses that class's spell list. I believe Black Razor, the prerequisite is alignment. I think it's any non-lawful alignment, if I remember correctly. Without becoming attuned to an item that requires attunement, a creature gains only its non-magical benefits, unless its description states otherwise. For example, a magic shield that requires attunement provides the benefits of a normal shield to a creature not attuned to it, but none of its magical properties. Attuning to an item requires a creature to spend a short rest focused on only that item while being in physical contact with it. This can't be the same short rest used to learn the item's properties. So if you're wanting to, really go by the rules, you have to do one short rest to kind of identify the item, if you will, and another short rest to attune to it. I just kind of allow both in the same short rest, but your experience will vary. Let's see. This focus can take the form of a weapon practice for a weapon, meditation for a wondrous item, or some other appropriate activity. If the short rest is interrupted, the attunement attempt fails. Otherwise, at the end of the short rest, the creature gains an intuitive understanding of how to activate any magical properties of the item, including any necessary command words. Now, so in some ways, 5th edition is more lenient on magical items, and in some ways it's more strict. So lenient, just this whole I attune to it and I know everything about it, and I can spend a short rest figuring out everything about it. That's more lenient than D&D used to be, for sure, back in the day. So that's more lenient. But this 3 spells, basically not spell slots, these attunement, 3 items max attunement on items that require attunement, that's a little stricter if I understand correctly or remember correctly. So to continue, an item can be attuned to only one creature at a time, and a creature can be attuned to no more than 3 magic items at a time. I'm going to read that again. An item can be attuned to only one creature at a time, and a creature can be attuned to no more than 3 magic items at a time. Any attempt to attune to a 4th item fails. The creature must end its attunement to an item first. Additionally, a creature can attune to more than one copy of an item. This is an important note. For example, a creature can attune to more than one ring of protection at a time. And I'm assuming that's even if you had one ring that was a ring of protection plus 1 and another one that was like plus 2, you couldn't do both of them even though their nature was slightly different. They're both rings of protection in italics, right? So a creature's attunement to an item ends if the creature no longer satisfies the prerequisites for attunement. For example, if my player that has Black Razor changed to a lawful alignment, he would no longer be attuned. If the item has been more than 100 feet away for at least 24 hours, that'd be if a DM needed a way to get a magic item out of play for a time, that could be a way to do it. If the creature dies, or if another creature attunes to the item. So that's interesting. It sounds to me like I could attune to this sword, and then somebody else could come along and attune to it after I did, and essentially steal it from me. The attunement part, anyway. A creature can also voluntarily end attunement by spending another short rest focused on the item unless the item is cursed. And if it's cursed, attunement to a cursed item can't be ended voluntarily unless the curse is broken first, such as with the remove curse spell. So that's attunement. During the short rest, or after the short rest, the knights declared they would not leave the bodies of Sir Bluto and their comrades, their two other comrades, out of honor, out of a code. Like, we're not going to leave the bodies behind. We must take the bodies with us. So again, even though that they're evil, they have a code amongst themselves. They're like, they're not going to leave the bodies behind. They're going to make sure that they're treated respectfully as possible given the circumstances. So the players actually decided to take the bodies and put them on the kayaks, like kind of lengthwise on the kayaks like this, kind of tied down, and carry the kayaks with the bodies on them. So they took 3 of the kayaks and put bodies on them. Now, the main way out of this room, if you don't want to kayak it back to room 23, is there's secret doors that, the knights, when they were talking to the knights, they were like, where does this key go to? And they were searching Sir Bluto, and he was like, or the knights were like, that there's a secret door over there. So they knew how to get out. And the secret door, basically, there's a corridor, kind of an L-shaped corridor with a secret door at either end. One secret door leads into the Sir Bluto area 24, the other in the hall leads to the hallway that runs north and south between area 23 that has the first part of the floating stream and the kayaks, and then south is the terraced aquarium with all the crazy animals and where Black Razor was, and so it leads out there. And then from there they can, exit the dungeon. So that's how they exited. And again, the knights were being very clear. Like, even though we trust you as our leader now because you used the rod of rulership on us, we're going to treat these bodies right. So they came to the frictionless room, and this is where things again got a little crazy. Really, I thought this session we'd spend a few minutes wrapping up the previous session, and then they would go to one of the other 2/3 of the dungeon that is remaining. That is not what happened. Like I said, we went off on a squirrel tangent. But we still had fun, which is the point, right? So the frictionless room, that the room that it's frictionless, there's a long stretch where the ceiling, the walls, and the floor are completely frictionless due to some sort of coating. Like really incredible advanced magical alchemical coating. Absolutely frictionless. And on either end of the frictionless area, which is like 70 feet or something like that, there's 2 pits on either end. There's a pit 5 feet wide, 10 feet long, filled with basically razor blade kind of spiky pieces of metal that will do damage to you, and also you have a chance of contracting super tetanus. So the point is, you hit the friction, you're like, ah, and you end up in one of the pits, and you take damage and maybe contract super tetanus and die. And then they still had their rope stretched across where they had been there before. So in most cases, they would have just used the ropes and gotten back across. Well, in this case, a couple things happen. One is, of course, you got to get the kayaks across with the bodies, because these charm knights, they're not leaving the bodies behind. The other thing is, 2 of my players thought it would be fun to get in a kayak. There's 2 holes in the kayak, so two people can ride a kayak at a time. Get in the kayak and zip across the floor to see what would happen on the other side. So that happened. It happened. They got in, and they were, pushed or whatever, and the rest of the party at no point did anybody say this is not a good idea. So I mean, we're in definite hold my beer mode right now, and things got a little silly. Now we had fun with it, but yeah, they got in, off they went, and I just basically ruled that they took 50 feet of falling damage. I mean, they just zip, boom, friction, they're in the kayak, woohoo! They ran across the frictionless floor, sailed across the pit on the other end, and just smashed smooth into that stone wall, or whatever the wall of the cavern is, the dungeon. Just bam, right into it. Kayak shatters and crumples up, and they're both and taking damage. So I said, well, they take 5d6 damage. 50 feet of falling damage. And then I ruled that they were going to be stunned, or, the official condition in D&D 5e is incapacitated. They're out of it. So they're laying there smashed up in the kayak, splinters in them bleeding, and they're stunned and incapacitated. And they're both like, that was awesome, the players. And I'm like, you idiot. I'm laughing. I'm laughing really hard. But I'm like, you idiots. Game wise, that was stupid. I was like, you idiots. But at the same time, I'm like, you wonderful idiots. I'm just dying laughing. Everybody else is laughing. And the two players that got hurt, and they're like, they're laughing. Everybody's having a good time. Now, one of the players like, that was great. He's got, or it's a male player, female character, 6 hit points left. After that. But hey, they had fun. And I'm thinking, when I said this was a funhouse style dungeon, this isn't exactly what I meant, but they were like, we're doing it, we're going for it. So off they went, smashed, and now they're out of the action for I think I said like 2 minutes. They're stunned. And the reason I ruled 5 or 50 feet of falling damage, I just kind of calculated, well, here's how much friction, and then they kind of go across the pit, and then they're going to hit the other side, and they're going to get a little bit of friction. They're going to slow down just a little bit, not much, but just a little. Finally going to hit some friction before they smash into the wall. I think they have about 20 feet of going across the floor before they hit the wall after zipping through the frictionless area. But also, ironically, or not ironically, but I kind of ruled that even though the kayak kind of hurt them by smashing up around them and giving them splinters and is part of the stunned thing, the kayak also absorbed some of the initial smash into the wall. So that kept them from taking more damage. So the kayak both kind of helped them and hurt them by smashing into the wall. And everyone's like, whoa. So that, there's a smashed up kayak with a couple of like stunned player character, and I'm just like, wow, I can't believe that just happened. But as a DM, I don't be like, well, you can't do that. Now, here's the thing. I don't like my games to be farcical or completely silly or dumb or whatever. But we don't do that kind of stuff very often. It's usually fair. We'll joke around and stuff like that. But the actual actions that the player characters take is usually, pretty serious or with the right tone. So if we do something like that every now and then, it's not a big deal. We had fun with it. If stuff like that was going on every session, I would probably start losing interest as a DM, because I'm wanting to tell a somewhat serious story. But it was fun, and I know that one of the players, like, it was their birthday the next day, so they were just kind of having some fun, and so we just went with it. But yeah, they zipped right across the frictionless floor in a kayak, and that really happened in my game. So there you go. Now, after that, you got some players taking the ropes across and being safe, and then you've got 2 knights and 2 bodies still trying to get, and 3 bodies that still need to get across. So what was determined is that one of the knights was going to get in the kayak, and Sir Bluto would be in the kayak with him. They're in Sir Bluto, like they removed the bodies from the kayaks that long ways and were setting them in the holes, so they're kind of like in the seat of the kayak, the bodies. And this one knight is kind of trying to ease Sir Bluto across. I gave him an athletics check and he failed it. So what I ruled was halfway across, he lost control and it zipped, and bam, right into the wall. Is what happened. So now what I ruled in this case was that he only took 3d6 damage because he was already halfway across. So he didn't get quite the same amount of frictionless zoom as the 2 brilliant PCs before him, but he still zipped across. The kayak smashed up, and he took 3d6 damage, and what I ruled is that he would have a 50% chance of being stunned / incapacitated. I ruled a 50% chance, and I rolled, and he was stunned and incapacitated, and I kind of ruled that, I would give every round, I would give a chance for him to break out of that, because he didn't take quite the damage that the other two players did, because he was trying for this not to happen. Now, on the role-playing side, Sir Bluto, their leader, their ex-leader's body, who they were trying to honor and treat as respectfully as possible, just zipped across a frictionless floor, sailed across a pit, and got smashed up in a kayak on a wall. And, you know, the guy in there is just like, the knight is like stunned, and Sir Bluto's body is just, whatever. But the other knight, who's still back on the other end with two or three of the PC, I think three of the PCs, because everybody else is across, he takes a look at this, and he not only is he, because things have been weird for a few hours now, right? His new trusted lord group basically killed his previous leader and a couple of his compatriots, but since he's charmed, he's been going with that, not mind control, but charmed. But things have just been weird. Now there's like bodies on kayaks and weird stuff going on, and occasionally these people are saying, hey, ask him to do stuff that he doesn't agree with. And now he's very upset about his compatriots dying, and his Sir Bluto, who was like his man, his lord, uh, just shot across a pit and got smashed up in a very ignoble manner, um, a very inglorious manner, very disrespectful, whether it was an accident or not. He's just like horrified. And all of this together just came together and snapped him out of his charm. I didn't give him a roll or anything like that. I just decided, as the DM narratively, this would be interesting to have him snap out of the charm with all these things coming together. He just finally snaps out, and he kind of looks around kind of confused, and then he, kind of comes to his senses. The tumblers kind of lock into place, snap, and he realizes what's going on. Now, one of my players was like, well, they don't forget everything that happened while they were charmed. He didn't forget any of it, but he's still like, he's seeing things through a whole new perception all of a sudden, whole new set of rules, paradigm, and he's like, took him a second, and then he snaps into who he used to be, or who, his real way of thinking, and he's like, he pulls out his sword, and he's like, Patrick, to arms, sorcery and foul deception. Now Sir Patrick, who's on the other end, I mean, he's out, he's incapacitated, and this night turns out to be Sir Steve. So at that point, we went into initiative and all of that. And Steve's ready to fight. Patrick, by the rolling, remained stunned through 2 or 3 rounds of initiative, so he never got in the mix. He's just like, ugh. And then Steve, the other night, they made short work of him. They got hold person on him, and Black Razor basically got another meal. So that's one thing I've noticed. Last session, they dispatched Sir Bluto with hold person and Black Razor, and then they did it again this session. So I don't want to take hold person away out of their tool set that they've earned. But just hold person in a way can be very disruptive. I think that it should have a higher saving throw, personally. But they base the saving throws on the level and abilities of the caster and stuff like that. But you could take a very powerful opponent and just render them completely vulnerable and remove them out of the action. They do get a saving throw every round to break out of it, and that's fair enough. But I'm not trying to get rid of hold person. It's just something I've noticed. So they kill Steve and dump him in the pit. And then Patrick wakes up, and he's like, he's looking around. He sees Sir Bluto's body. He's horrified. And then he's like, I can't believe, he's just ashamed. And then he's like, where's Steve? And they said, that Steve was attempting to help and fell into the pit at the other end and died on all the razors. And he's like, that sounds like Steve. So we were just having some fun with that. Everybody was laughing. So basically, he's very ashamed at what has happened, and he basically fireman carries Sir Bluto's body the rest of the way out of the dungeon. And the party at this point is actually beginning to kind of like Patrick. They're impressed with his sense of honor and his, dedication to his previous master. But we talked again. I said these, because they're talking about, oh, maybe we should invite this guy into the Vanguard of the Eye, which is their adventuring guild. And I'm like, you can do what you want, but man, these knights are evil. They've confessed to some pretty nasty crimes to you, but they were impressed with his attitude and all of that, which is cool because it showed, you can have moments with NPCs where you just kind of start ad-libbing with an NPC, and this NPC can become very alive to the party. They'll probably remember Patrick, way on down the road. Um, because they were seriously talking, like more than one player was like, we should invite this guy into our group. Uh, you know, so I guess they could just keep doing rod of rulership on him. I don't know. Um, so they got one kayak left that's not all smashed up, and they have two bodies, uh, plus Sir Bluto. They left Steve, and they're like, we can't get Steve out of the pit. And Patrick's like, oh, it's a grim reality. So they have two bodies. They have Sir Bluto's body. They have Patrick. They have everybody, and they get out. Now, other notes of we're pretty much at the end of the session for the most part, but other notes, they use Tensor's floating disc to get down the hallway uh, that heats metal. They just piled all the metal armor and went over it. Once again, I'm thinking they could use a bag of holding, but that didn't seem to occur to them. I don't know if you can get a breastplate or whatever into a bag of holding. I know there's some rules about can it fit and stuff, but it'd be worth looking at. But they used Tensor's floating disc. There was some joking around about letting Patrick just walk down there, uh, with his full armor on and everything, but they didn't. Like I said, they like, no, we're not going to do that to Patrick. They kind of like him. Um, but they, he's like, they were like, take off your armor. And he's like, why? Because I'm kind of role playing it like they were just kind of teleported in to this room. They didn't go through all the dungeon traps and stuff to get there. So this stuff's kind of new to him. Um, so they used Tensor's floating disc, got past that. They came back to the Sphinx. The Sphinx allows them to leave, is neither hostile nor overly friendly, just kind of like, interacting with them. They asked what the Sphinx's name was. I didn't say. I don't know. I need to make one up. Now, in the White Plume Mountain novel that I talked about by Paul Kidd a couple of videos again, they named the Sphinx Enid, and she actually ends up joining the party and becoming a character in future books. But I'm not going to take it that far. But she wasn't hostile. She wasn't overly friendly. She was like, there you are. I'm actually kind of surprised to see you. Um, and was very surprised to see that they had Black Razor. That impressed the Sphinx. And then they left, and the Sphinx just kept doing its duty. Now, I am going to change the riddle each time they leave past where that wall of force is and come back. There's going to be a different riddle. It's not going to be the moon every time. And if you just get out there and search White Plume Mountain riddles, and there's resources out there. People have suggested riddles to use. I may or may not use those. So they leave the dungeon. They go up to that big, long, 100-foot kind of spiral staircase. I said, look, you guys have bodies to manage, this and that and the other, and this kayak is very it's going to be incredibly hard to get this kayak up that 100-foot spiral staircase. I said, not impossible, but with everything you're trying to do, pretty difficult. And they ended up leaving. And one character was like, I'll carry it. And it was like a gnome. And I was like, what's your strength? And I was like, I really don't think that you're going to be able to do that. We could have gone for the rolls to see if it happened. But the point I was making is, going up that spiral staircase, it's taking a kayak up there is kind of weird. But if they really would have pushed it, I would have allowed them to do it. We'd have figured out a way to make it happen, either through narration or role playing or roles. And once they get out, I had them exit at midday, and I stressed how incredibly great it feels to be outside and to feel and breathe fresh air, because the dungeon is really nasty, and it's damp and wet, and it's sulfurous because there's all this sulfur in there from the volcano, and it's dirty and foul, and it's just nasty, and you just got stuff gritted into you. It's just ugh. And even one of the characters was like, I use prestidigitation. I said, it dries your clothes and this, that, and the other, but you still feel sort of a grime. It's just nasty in White Plume Mountain. So they make it back to the village about the time that the charm wears off. on Sir Patrick. And they're just straight up with him. They're like, we're turning you in for your crimes and all of that. And, you don't really have a choice. I mean, he's way outnumbered. Um, and then so at the village, they turn Sir Bluto's body, the other two bodies, minus Steve, who went into the pit, good old Steve, and Patrick, the living knight, are turned over to basically we invented, Billy Bob, the local sheriff. I don't even know what his name is. He's some local yokel sheriff who's like, this is way. He's like, whoa. So they have like one cell in town they hardly ever use. So he locks up Patrick and uh, the bodies and everything. He's completely overwhelmed at what's going on, and he immediately locks them up and dispatches messages for help, to the whoever he reports to or whatever. And they're like, well, this is Sir Bluto, and because we talked last time, he's got this incredibly bad reputation, um, like some mass murderer. He's wanted. I'm role playing as by extension. His knights are wanted. This is a big deal. I mean, this is like Black Bart. We've been looking, from the old westerns, and it's a big deal. So the player's like, here you go, courtesy the Vanguard of the Eye. And I ruled last session. Uh, I had a player that was there just for one session. He's a friend of the group. Played with us for a while. I had to move, and he comes in and out. And he had a bounty hunter background, and he was just playing one night. And he's like, "Do I know that Sir Bluto?" I said, "Yep." So he chopped off the head and took it for the reward. I just, for the playing um, the other night, the other side, I said that actually didn't really narratively happen. He still has his head on and all that. It was just a nice, fun moment for our buddy, right? Because he's not going to be back for weeks or months or whatever. Um, and then the town is also really awestruck by the group returning with Black Razor. That's basically where we left things. Now, these weapons are legendary and a lot of people want them. And if you don't think the word's not going to get around real quick that Black Razor has made an appearance, uh, I've got some thoughts in mind to how I'm going to finish White Plume Mountain, and that could factor in. But anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. We will catch you next time on the Shane Plays. I keep wanting to say Out of the Abyss because I did that for so long, and we'll get back to that after White Plume Mountain. But the White Plume Mountain Notes series, welcome your comments, your questions. Please leave a thumbs up on the video and maybe a comment. That helps me out a lot. If you don't subscribe to the channel already, I sure would appreciate if you did. But regardless, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time on Shane Plays.